folks, and welcome back to another episode of your Brains Coach podcast. My name is Angela Sharina. I'm your host, I'm your Brains Coach, and it is my job here to help you find, discover, apply all those brain body tools to feel, look, do your absolute best, and ultimately to design your life experience as you want. And folks, today I am super excited because this has been a long time coming. On this podcast today, we have a guest that whose work ultimately and completely changed the way I think about designing my life experience. I think about achieving goals, or I think about coaching my clients and helping people. Her work has been transformational, and I wanted to introduce her work to you folks because Emily Balcetis, the guest on our podcast, she will give you, and she studies and researches these science-based tools, science application, neuroscience application to the art of building our dream life through learning how to achieve our goals better through different tools that help us to improve our focus and our motivation and our perspective on things, managing our self-talk. So Emily Balcetis, she's an associate professor of psychology and the director of the New York University Social Perception, Action, and Motivation Research Lab. So Emily Balcetis has been described as a pioneer of the scientific investigation of behavioral science and motivation. She's the author, and by the way, that's how I discovered her work initially. She's the author of Clearly, Closer, Better, How Successful People See the World. She's a TEDx speaker. She leads an international team of scholars, writers, artists, and advocates. In her research, Emily has uncovered previously unknown strategies that increase, sustain, and direct people's efforts to meet their goals. Her work has been supported by numerous national grants from the National Science Foundation and appears in over 75 scientific publications. And again, why I was so passionate and eager to invite Emily to this podcast and have this conversation that I could share with you folks is because Emily is in the middle of emerging research of helping us to achieve of this research that covers science-based tools that dig deeper at the neuroscience, the science about our brain and how we see the world. So her research, her efforts, her lab's efforts and everything that she does, it helps us to manage our mind better, our focus, our motivations better. So we achieve our long-term goals better, long-term goals that ultimately shape our life and either bring us towards the vision of our life we have or take us away from that vision. And folks, without further ado, please enjoy our conversations where you're going to learn how to change on demand and design your own focus, your own motivation, your own perception of how things go and are in your life. Again, all with this mission and intention to shape your life exactly as you want. And folks, we live for almost 100 years, right? Depending on how lucky we get and how good of a care we take care of ourselves. And it is important to be intentional about your goals and what you do and what kind of an effort you put into your goals. So Emily, again, brings to us science-based, but also very simple, requiring basically no cost, but requiring your attention, your awareness, and a little bit more effort and thought into organizing your life so it supports your focus, your motivation, your goals. So without further ado, guys, please tune in and stay tuned because each piece of this conversation will bring to you very practical tools and great insights about how your brain works and how you can use your brain and your ability to design your environment to achieve your goals and to shape your life. And before you tune in to our conversation, I'd like to give you a quote that I'd like you to kind of ruminate on. What we see directly predicts what we do. So again, what we see directly predicts what we do. A quote from our conversation from Emily Balcetis. And now, please enjoy the conversation, and then don't forget to share and explore Emily's work and connect with Emily to deepen your understanding of what drives you, how achieve your goals, so you design the life that you dream about. So tune in, enjoy, share, and connect. Emily Balcetis, welcome to Your Brains Coach podcast. So very excited to have you here. Just thank you so much for being here.
Sure, my pleasure.
Yes, I know you're busy, right? And as a professor, what university are you a professor at? And you're a professor of psychology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, psychology at New York University.
Mm-hmm. And you study, from what I learned, perception, specifically, the area of psychology, perception of people, of their environment, right? And how of their world, and how things like motivations, goals, and emotions, and the way we literally look at the world changes changes this world for us and what we ultimately do, right?
Yes, that is true. That's the work that we do. You did a great summary.
I'm just a fan of your work, especially after I read your book, Clearly, Closer, Better, How Successful People See the World. It put, for me personally, so many things into I think a good system for me to be able also to, as I need, change my view on the world to help me to achieve goals and to get through challenging moments, right, that we all have when we get stuck. Perhaps, Emily, we could start for our listeners also to have a little bit more background. How did you get to study these things, and how did you get to write this amazing book?
How it started, it came from a lot of different projects, a lot of different, things that I was thinking about. But one that I feel like was sort of the inspiration for a lot of the work that we've done on exercise in particular, though the book is not exclusively about exercise, was that I had the chance to talk with a bunch of the world's fastest runners, Olympic athletes that had won gold medals, the fastest man out of Trinidad, people who trained alongside the fastest, Lightning Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world. This was a really cool opportunity to ask them how they do what they do, how they break these land speed records. And what was even more amazing was that I found these people by way of introduction just at a local community gym, like a family YMCA, where, kids are there with their parents, and new moms are trying to get in a few more steps, trying to rock their baby to sleep. And high school students are training for their track team. And then there were these guys. And without that introduction, I wouldn't have known that they were as incredible as they are, because they're also so humble. So they're just sitting there stretching like everybody else was on the side of the track. And I went in thinking that there must be something really amazing about how their eyes work. That was one thought that I had. Of like, they probably have superpowers of visual perception, that they know, like, where are they going? How far is it into the finish line? Where are they relative to all their competition? Like this hyper awareness of their entire surroundings. And I was wrong. A lot of my best ideas started because I had the wrong intuition. Instead, what they told me was that they are really focused. They have a more narrowed, like tunnel-like sense of visual scope, where they pick a target. It could be, the finish line or the curve in a track or a competitor who's up ahead. And they focus on that target until they hit it and pass it. And then they choose the new target. And so that was really like insightful to me. That was not what I thought would be the case. And I wondered, is that something that we can teach other people? And would it change their performance as well? So the answer is yes and yes. When I describe that experience for people, can you imagine that there's a spotlight shining just on, the building several blocks up, or, the traffic light or the big tree that's out in the distance? Imagine there's a spotlight shining just on that you have, sort of blinders on, and you're not paying attention to what's in your peripheral vision. Can you do that? Well, yeah. And you may have even been like imagining it now as I give those instructions. And we found that, yes, people can do that. And it's different than what they naturally do when they're trying to, go out for walks or go out for runs. But when they do that, when they use that narrowed focus of attention in our lab, in sort of this, this sort of race course that we set up in the lab, where we know that the distance is the same for every single person, those that narrowed their focus of attention rather than allowing it to wander sort of around as it naturally would, paying attention to what's over there and what's over there, they moved 23% faster and said that it hurt. The exercise hurt 17% less. So the distance was exactly the same. The exercise was exactly the same, right? But their way of looking at the world changed.
I'm a geek, and a lot of listeners of this podcast probably are a little bit on the geekier side. So what did you find was like kind of the science of it? Like, why did it happen? Why did people perform better when they focus narrower and only, on the next step instead of, a whole distance ahead of them?
Yeah, it wasn't magic. It's sort of, it can seem like magic or something, but it's not, because there's this whole cascade of effects that happen by changing how we look at the world around us. So one of the first things that happens when we narrow our focus of attention is that whatever we're focusing on seems closer to us. We have that visual experience of proximity. Now, what does that do? Not only is it sort of like distorting our sense of space and relationships to other things that are in our environment, but it has a host of psychological consequences as well. Now, when that finish line or that stop sign or the next tree that I'm trying to push myself towards feels closer, looks closer, people say, oh, it's not that hard to get there. I think I've got it in me. I'm up to the challenge. It's not going to be that difficult to get there. Their appraisal, their cognitive beliefs and the difficulty of the task and their ability to meet the demands that this requires totally shifts. Then when that happens, people are motivated. That's motivation. They are motivated to try to go for it because it defies their previous expectations about what was possible for themselves. So that narrowed attention is having a direct impact on our psychology that is then translating into a change in our actual performance. And then because it sort of defied our expectations that it really was easier than we thought that it would be, people, once they leave our lab, they continue their better performance. They go out for more walks, they walk farther, they walk faster, they take more steps in that time because they've just learned a strategy that ended up improving their experience with minimal or no cost to how they're approaching it.
Yeah, I can relate to that experience. I go daily for my walks, and very often it's the same walk. And on some days I feel better about it. I feel like, I have so much energy, I'm just going to go, and no problem. On some days I feel I don't have energy. The day was already busy. Like I just kind of feel drained a little bit. And what I do is I tell myself, there is this house. I'm going to just get to this one and see how I feel, right? There is this next block. I'm going to get only to that block. And when I break down this distance into shorter distances, it feels manageable. And all of a sudden I have this like I have more energy. And what I'm also curious about is, do we actually does it change how energy, cycle works? I heard you saying on one of the podcasts that in my studies, it seems that when the goal is closer, what we do is narrowing our focus. Like our brain releases more dopamine, and that helps the body, to release more energy or something like that. Is that the case?
Sure. Some of the work that I've talked about, it was conducted by colleagues of mine at New York University, and they looked at the energization, the mobilization, our body's, change in our physiology of our body that helps us get our jobs done. And they looked at it in terms of goal setting. How difficult do we set the goals for ourselves. Now, there's all kinds of possibilities, but we can sort of bin them into very challenging, almost impossible, far beyond what we've ever accomplished before. Really easy. We know we can do this. It'll take very little for us to get this job done, or something in the middle, right? It pushes us just beyond the brink of what we are capable of, or something that we have done before. And it, sort of in that sweet spot in the middle. Now, they looked at systolic blood pressure. So that's the top number on our blood pressure reading. And behavioral scientists know that that's actually, systolic blood pressure is an indicator of our body's readiness to do something. So this was studied first a lot with race horses that were in their stalls right before the gates open, and they're about to, run as fast as they ever have before. And so even though they're not moving, they're not able to really move because they're in a confined pen right now, moments before those gates opened, systolic blood pressure increased in anticipation of needing to do something that was important. Now, researchers have studied it in people as well, systolic blood pressure changes. And what they found is that even when people are just sitting and they're about to do challenging math problems, systolic blood pressure also goes up. So even though our bodies aren't going to move, we need that kind of intense concentration and focus. And our body is preparing to give us, if anything, that mental energy, the ability to focus mentally to perform well on this, on a task that just requires our brain to be engaged. So all of that is the backdrop to say that systolic blood pressure is an indicator of mobilization, of our body getting ready to do something that's relevant to our goals. And what my colleagues at New York University found was that systolic blood pressure actually stays pretty low on these extreme ends. When you set goals that are really difficult or really easy, but it's higher in the middle when we set goals that are moderately challenging, that push us just beyond the brink of what we think is possible. Because if we think that it's impossible, then what's the point of even trying? And if we know that we can get it done and there's no challenge, then we don't need to put a lot into it. And so our body doesn't gear up to put us in the best state possible to work on our projects or work on our goals, when our mind is saying it's not worth the investment, or you don't even need to invest, because of course this is going to happen for you. So we can think conscientiously about how difficult we set our goals, if we want to try to produce a change in our body that would help us get there.
Yeah. And I love, this connection, because it connects kind of the non-physical act of setting our goals in a certain way with the physical act or the processes that are happening in our body, in our brain, that help us to mobilize resources for achieving whatever we are trying to achieve, right? And so when we learn how to set the goals the right way, we can actually make our body and brain work in the right way to have better chance of achieving these goals.
Yeah, exactly. We can set ourselves up better for success.
In the book, Clearer, Closer, Better, you are also walking us through, I actually remembered it, I think, most of all, your personal story of drumming and how you used different tools that, different tools of perceiving the world and designing the world to look at it different, to achieve your own goal, your personal goal of, performing this piece of music on drums for the first time, right? Can you also walk us through that? Like, for example, where did you use there on this journey, this narrow focus to get you through the challenging moments that were many?
Sure. So yeah, I'm a researcher. I direct a research lab. But when I was going to school, when I was in college, I wanted to be a rock star. I played saxophone and flute and piano, but not drums. I'm really not coordinated in that sense. I can't pat my head and rub my belly at the same time. And when I was, in fifth grade, I was on a basketball team and I tripped over my own feet and ran into my teammate who had the ball, pushed her out of bounds, and she lost possession, and I wasn't invited back to play basketball again. So choosing something like learning how to play drums, where you have to coordinate all four of your limbs doing different things at the same time, was going to be, in my mind, almost to that point of setting a goal that like, I really wondered if it was impossible for me, but it was something that I wanted to do because playing drums is cool. And at the time that the time I was working on this project, I had just given birth to my first child. And I feel like I just lost myself, in that experience. I wasn't cool anymore. I used to be the one with all these crazy adventure stories and like, situations I found myself in that I had to get out of, and that everybody loved hearing my stories about my adventures in New York City. And then I had my baby, and it was like, all I could talk about was diapers and bottles and poop. And I didn't really talk, whatever. I didn't want to talk about it, but I had nothing else to say. And I was like, what happened to me? This isn't working. This isn't who I am. I want to try to get cool again, if that's possible. And so I decided I want to learn to play drums. And it was a bad choice because we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan with neighbors really close by. And I had a new baby, and I'm still directing this like international research lab. So there's a lot on my plate, but it was a personal goal that was important to me. So all the strategies that I talk about that might be useful at different stages of setting or pursuing a goal or trying to maintain our motivation, I tried on myself as I went from not being able to do anything on the drums to performing this song for an audience. And in fact, like since then, I played with a band. I played this song with a band for a really big show of like, several thousand people, just the one song. All I wanted to do is learn the one song. Yeah, but there's so many for a goal that's that long, that will require that much continued
How long
stamina.
did it take you?
I'm embarrassed to say that I worked to learn one song for over a year. It took a very long time for me to do it. And and it's not really a translatable skill. I can't really play more than one song. So.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter, how long it took you. What I was getting at is like a year. It's a long-term goal, right? Yeah. So how did here, for example, your narrow focus help you to get through those perhaps challenging moments when you wanted to give up? And it's like you had so much on your plate, right? And I'm not sure if you were writing the book at the same time or not, but it's like a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I was writing the book. So, narrowed focus, we can apply it to exercise and physical space and physical landmarks that we focus our like illusionary spotlight on, but we can think about using narrowed focus in other ways as well. You can think about it in terms of time. So, like physical distance, temporal distance is a thing. And oftentimes it's time that can be challenging for us to deal with. Like learning to play drums took me over a year. And so that is a long period of time to stay focused on this goal. And that can be true for other goals too, like saving for retirement. Like, you could be in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, and saving for retirement might not be on your forefront of your mind. And in fact, it's not. When I do interviews with people, that's the number one reason that they say that they're not saving for retirement, is that it just seems so far away. Yeah. Right? There might be other goals that we have that require sustained commitment for a really long period of time. And that can make it challenging to make good choices today, to make sacrifices today that won't pay off for a very long time in the future. So how do we continue to push through that when that's the case? Well, what we can do is try to find ways using narrowed focus to constrict, to bring that future self that's going to be the one playing the song, being the one that gets to cash in on their retirement account, a little bit closer to the here and now, more relevant, more tangible, and not so abstract. So building off of Hal Hirschfield's research, a researcher at UCLA, he came up with this idea that I riffed off of, which, and that I worked on with some students of mine who were not saving for retirement, but certainly would benefit if they were. I took a picture of their face and, use some technology to morph in a famous, older, successful person like Maya Angelou or Betty White or Dan Rather, so that they could see what does a future them maybe look like? What does it look like to have more wrinkles or white hair? Most of them were horrified. One man said, I actually think I look pretty good, but only the man said that. But what it did do then was make it more concrete. Like, who is this person that's going to cash in on the retirement savings and get this money that I'm putting away now? And the other way that I did it when I was playing drums was just trying to really envision, what's that going to be like? What's the space going to look like? What's it going to be like when I'm sitting there, when there are people that are in the audience? You know, making that visual clear, materializing it, not just leaving it in the abstract, but sort of putting myself into that future space. And when I did that and thought about how terrible I am right now, sitting there on the stage with this drum kit and with, you know, this audience, like, okay, I got to keep focusing up here. Like, that's not that far away. I really need to figure out a different strategy, right? That's what that narrowed focus did for me, was contract that time.
Yeah. And for my personal goals, right? If I'm, for example, at some point feel like I'm not focused on my, I don't know, healthy eating or fitness, right? I always try to envision in my head this like future self in a year. And I have two versions. One that continued this path of not taking care of myself. And that person, was low on energy, was, fatter and just not feeling that great about themselves and about life, right? Kind of overwhelmed. And then the second version that actually started to take better care of herself and, fitness and healthy habits and sleep. And that, version is smiling and achieved certain goals and really proud of herself. And just being good with that visualization always helps me get back to today and what I gotta do today to actually make this version reality.
Yeah. That might resonate with a lot of people. Like the idea of like, what sort of comparison do you use? Do you use a downward comparison, some version of yourself or somebody else that has it worse off than what you do now or where you're going, or somebody who has it better? What is it that you're working towards, or what is it that you're working to avoid? Now that can pop up as sort of individual differences, like a personality characteristic. Are we more avoidant, or are we more approach oriented? Are we trying to motivate ourselves by saying like, well, don't go there, like, don't get that bad. Or like, come on, you can do it. This is what you're working towards, like approaching the desired end state. Now, there's, a lot of things I could say about that. The downward social comparison, when we choose somebody else who maybe isn't doing as well as us, that can be effective, but not necessarily in the long run, because like what you're left thinking is like, well, okay, at least that's not me. But then, well, what do you do about it? Then at least it's not you, but how can you grow and how can you do better? How can you ensure that it's not you? It's not such a clear path. Like, how do I not become that? It might not be as straightforward. It also just puts us in a negative space. It's a little bit of the like guilt, feelings of guilt, or I don't know, like trying to motivate ourselves through fear. Like, oh, I just hope that I don't become that. And is that sort of an emotional palette that we want to stay in? I would say probably not. It might help in the short run, but not in the long run.
There is one thing I also read somewhere that negative motivation, from negative, it actually doesn't work that well as, motivation from the positive. We kind of like only do just enough when we have negative motivation. Whereas when it's positive, we are more likely to over deliver, so to speak, and do more, because that puts us in that positive, optimistic frame of mind. Somewhere I read also some research. What I'd like to switch now to the second tool. I remembered, these 4 tools that you described through different stories. And that is kind of on the opposite spectrum and can help in different situations. And I don't think I'm that clear on where exactly you use it. So I'm talking about white brackets. Right? Looking what, in my words, at the bigger picture. So where would you say it can help people to achieve their goals? Where perhaps it helped you on your drumming journey to, again, go through some challenges easier and faster?
So the wide bracket is in contrast to the narrowed scope of attention. And rather than thinking of them as like contradictory, I like to think of these 4 strategies as tools in our toolbox. In the same way that you can't build a house with just a hammer, you need a lot of different tools to build a house. The same is true as we're building out our perfect life, as we're working towards those goals that we want to achieve. We need more than one tool. So the narrowed focus of attention can be helpful, like those instances we've talked about when you need to contract space to find the connection between today and some far off future. The wide bracket is in contrast to that, in that you're right. We're taking a bigger perspective. We're trying to get more information in and paying attention to all the options that are presented before us. This can be really useful when we need to disengage or switch course, when we're trying to move forward in a particular way and it's not working for us. And we need, and so, you know, at that point, some people might be thinking like, oh, I'm just done. This isn't working. I got to change goals. I have to change my job. I have to find a new partner. This isn't working. And when you feel yourself thinking that way, talking that way, what we're doing is talking about, you know, changing the goal. But sometimes we just need to change the way to get to the goal. So it's possible we might need to change our job. It's possible we might need to change out our partner. But before we go that route necessarily, maybe it's that we need to find another means, another path to whatever end state it is that we're working towards. So if you can imagine, you know, like going for a hike in a forest, and if you are in the dense forest and all you can see are a few options that are ahead of you, do I go to this side of the tree? Do I go to that side of the tree? You only have a few different ways that you can move forward. But if you could like zoom out and be hovering over in a helicopter above that forest, you might see actually there are like multiple paths to get through this forest to get to the other side. But when you're in it, it can be really challenging to see those alternatives. There's a great example of this when I was digging into the backstory of Vera Wang. So Vera Wang, you know, fashion designer, she's famous for her wedding dresses made out of big fluffy tulle fabrics. And she has quite an amazing empire, but fashion is not where she started in life. She started as a figure skater on ice rink.
I've read about that in your book, but that was her first career, and she was amazing at it. You know, she was competing on the international stage. She was doing incredibly well, but there was a point where she wasn't improving. She wasn't coming in first place. And so she had plateaued at that point and kept coming essentially in second place, and needed to make a decision about, do I continue to try to do this thing, to come up against this door, like just keep hitting the same level. I'm getting to the top, but you know, to this plateau, but I can't exceed it. What am I going to do? So she, some people say that she quit her passion. And she did step away from figure skating, and she took a year to think it through at the Sorbonne in Paris about what she wanted to do with her life. And that's when she transitioned into fashion and design. And that might seem like a really big change. Like she quit athletics and she went into fashion and did this, you know, major shift, and leaving one career to start up a totally brand new one. But from her perspective, not, because what she knew was that she loved the art of line. You can cut lines into the ice, you can cut lines into fabric, and you can play with the beauty of line in multiple forms. Like there's so many different domains and disciplines that you can engage with that kind of art form. So for her, it wasn't quitting, but it was finding a new means to staying focused on her actual passion. And that's when it can be helpful then to zoom out and see, you know, if this is what I want to do, and this is what brings me joy and what my brain loves to focus on, what's another way through this forest of life to stay true to that passion, but come out the other side, engaging in something other than figure skating. And, you know, it reminds me like a little bit of a personal story. So I've been working as a coach for 10 plus years, and it wasn't really moving, you know, anywhere significantly. And people started to tell me like, maybe it's time to, you know, quick consider other careers. And I'm like, but I love what I do. And I, look at my life and I'm like, but I didn't have to quit. Maybe there are other ways to express the same, passion for coaching or helping people. And I don't have to like switch my careers to a completely different field and go, I have a degree also in a computer science and go there, even though, I have like no passion for that. Right? And so let me like open up my world a little bit and see where I can apply the skill that I'm passionate about. Yeah. Instead of thinking like, this is the only way. And if I'm not succeeding, I gotta just quit.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Just wanted to give, folks also a little bit more perspective and I think practical application of these tools. And then you have two other, I believe, very important strategies to help people to achieve their goals. And they also have to do with designing our world. So we do look at it and see it differently to help us to succeed at whatever we're trying to do, right? So the first one, I don't think they're in order, like materializing, right? Can you tell our listeners a little bit more what it is as a tool and how it can help different domains to help you keep going after your goals, keep achieving instead of quitting?
Materializing is the idea that we need to make concrete the things that we might otherwise just try to keep in our brain and remember. So, we prioritize the things that we see. If we can think about that in terms of our calendar, we rarely just put something in our calendar and then not go to that appointment or not reschedule the appointment. Like we prioritize those things that are in our calendar because we see them in there, scaffolding our day and how we're going to spend our time. And those things that go in our calendar are important, but they're not necessarily more important than the things that we just try to keep in our brain. Like, I got to remember, I need to remember, I got to reschedule that dentist appointment, but I never put in my calendar, this is the time that you will reschedule the dentist appointment, right? I just keep trying to remember. And by the end of the day, it's been a week and I still haven't rescheduled that dentist appointment, right? Because I just keep trying to remember it. But I don't just forget those things that I put into my calendar because what we see has a special place in our mental space. And so that's sort of the heart of the idea of materializing is that, our brain and our memory systems are faulty by design, that we don't remember everything that we have thought about or that we come across, that we see, that we hear, that we taste, that we touch. We don't remember all of that. Our brain would be completely overwhelmed if that was the case. And also, we probably wouldn't be as happy and like psychologically healthy if we remembered everything. Like every time that we said something a little bit silly or we hurt somebody's feelings or that we didn't perform at our best. If we actually remembered all of that, we wouldn't be as effective of human beings. So our brain is designed to level and sharpen, to get rid of some of those details about what's come through it. But that can do us a disservice when we're trying to sustain our progress on things that matter to us. It can also make it tricky for us to be accurate accountants for our own progress. If we just try to remember, where did I start? Where am I now? How far do I have to go? How much effort have I put in? Our brain isn't going to do a good job of being able to notate that for us. Instead, we need to write it down. We need to have it somewhere concrete that so that we can accurately make those kinds of assessments. Now, when I was trying to learn to play drums, I had that experience myself, was that I could hear myself playing and just thought, I'm terrible. This is awful. I am not learning anything. And there's no way that I am going to be able to play this song and this is going to be like an embarrassment for me. That was my assessment every time I sat down to practice, especially at the beginning and in the middle of all of this. And so, of course, I didn't want to practice then because every time it was like a failure experience, or that's the way I was thinking about it as I reflected on my past. So to decide like, okay, is this actually worth it? Am I making any improvements? I decided to collect data on myself. I love data. I'm a scientist, right? So I collect data on myself. So I downloaded an app called the Reporter app, and you can set up, there's that one, or there's many others where you can set it up to like have your phone ask you anything that you want it to. I set it up to ask me, have you practiced since last time I asked you? Yes or no? And then if I said yes, it would ask me follow-up questions. How did you feel? Write down a couple of emotions and anything else that I wanted to take note of. And then I did that for a month. I had it, ask me 3 or 4 times a day, every day for a month, those questions. And then at the end of the month, I downloaded all the data to my computer and charted my progress. Now, what I found out was that I actually put in more time than I realized that I had practiced. I had practiced 9 times in that month. Now, like, that's not going to make me a world-class drummer, but that means that I practiced 1, 2, or 3 times a weekend, every weekend for a month. And that average actually was like, well, that's fine. That's realistic. I mean, with having a kid and a real job, like, what are the odds that I'm going to be able to do really more than that? So it helped me to understand, what am I actually doing to alleviate the anxiety? Because there are 5 days that I would go through the work week not practicing, and only 2 days where I would. And so I wasn't giving that the appropriate weight and perspective. In hindsight, like, that is fine. That is a reasonable amount of effort to be putting in. But then, is it producing any improved product? So I looked at the emotion words that I had written. And at the beginning of the month, they were awful. It was, I sound terrible. I hate this. I cried. And I did. I cried a lot listening to myself. And then by the end, I had gotten a compliment from my husband, who is actually a legitimate rock drummer. So, and it wasn't just that he has to give me compliments, because that's not the way that he operates. And he's not believable when he lies. So by the end of it, I had earned a real compliment. Plus, I knew that I was feeling better about myself, because my emotion words weren't as negative. So, while in the moment, any one given day, it just felt like I'm getting nowhere and this is ridiculous. When I actually took note, I was able to override my faulty memory biases and get a more accurate sense of whether I was on an uphill slope or a downhill slope.
And I imagine, and also remembering, instances from my personal life, that having now this data that your brain cannot deny, and knowing that you're making progress, it makes you want to continue. Because what I think, I always talk to my brain, I'm like, well, probably my brain now knows that I'm not wasting time, and that that's gonna, that's gonna be something, some reward or some better future, because I'm putting in the work. And, also about just putting things on paper and making them real, materializing them from, our heads into reality. It reminded me, of this fact, like, a lot of people talk about procrastination a lot. Like, why don't I do these things? Why don't I work out? Why don't I learn a second language, even though I want to, right? And very often, I like to, remind people that, well, maybe because when you have work, you have calls, appointments, it's because you do have them on your calendar, and dates with yourself, so to speak, or your other goals, you don't have it anywhere except for your head. That's why you always, skip them. And I found also for myself and people I advised that once they started to put that on their calendar and start writing things down, that it actually, started to work out. Yeah. So, I believe, that materializing, that's such a huge piece, and it can be done also in so many ways. If you do your fitness routine, you can just put it, a check mark on a calendar. I don't know, put some sort of note about how you felt. So, that can help folks to help in so many areas. Do you have anything to add here?
That's if you have you have an Apple Watch or something, that's why it's motivating to see the rings as they close throughout the day, to see the badges that you earn, to look for streaks. That's why, if you feel like an addiction to your watch and tracking your activity levels that way, that's one of the reasons, right? Is because it's overriding your memory, and it's giving you something visual and concrete to focus on, to help you track your progress.
Yeah, and nothing I from my experience motivates us more than our own progress. And when we see that we actually progressing, not stop.
Yeah, right.
The last tool is framing, right? That's the other one that you talked about in your book, and I also I practice it as much as possible, and I truly believe in it. For me, framing means a lot of different things, right? It's about organizing our environment to help us do things, but then also to help us to maybe put our failures in the opportunity perspective, so to speak, right? But what in your mind, words, and how would you talk about framing, like what it can do for us and what it is?
It's recognizing and taking advantage of the power of our sight and knowing that what we see directly predicts what we do. So we can be intentional about that and sort of curate our visual environment in a way that will spark the choices and actions that we really want to be taking. You can think about it with respect to like, how do you organize your refrigerator? What appears on the shelves at eye level? What's behind the first layers of items that are there? What's easy for your kids to grab? What's easy for you or your partner to grab? What's right at arm's reach or at eye level? I, not joke, this is true, but part of this resonates like with my husband that, if I want him to serve our children vegetables and I'm gone that night, then I need to put them at 6 feet high off of the ground and in the front layer, right? Not in the veggie drawers, not in the fruits and vegetable drawers. They need to be like front and center for, not because he doesn't care about vegetables, but because if he doesn't see it, then he doesn't pull it out at all. He doesn't go digging for them. There was, but more formally, there was studies that were done on this very idea. One of them was done at Massachusetts General Hospital in the cafeteria and how they arrange what's on the shelves and for employees and for cafeteria visitors to consume. And they made some changes. They put the salads, the healthier things higher up. They put the unhealthy things further down. And they used sort of a traffic light system of putting red stickers, yellow stickers, and green stickers on the foods and drinks. Green stickers meaning, this is a healthy option, feel free to go for it. Red meaning this is an unhealthy one, consume with caution or moderation. And the yellow, meaning, in moderation, occasionally this is okay. And what they found was that shifting not only the location of where healthy versus unhealthy options were placed and coordinating with this traffic sticker idea increased the number of healthy foods chosen, waters that were purchased, and decreased the number of junk foods that were purchased. And so we can do that for our own life, not just how we stock our fridge, but what else are we trying to nudge, do more of, or do less of? And are there visual cues in our environment that are making it easier for us to do the stuff we actually don't want to be doing and harder for us to do the stuff that we do? So you can wake up in the morning and what's at the foot of your bed? Is it slippers or is it running shoes? What do you have a nice fluffy robe sitting there on a chair close by, or do you have your yoga mat out? Those are just a couple of examples of how we might be setting ourselves up or making it a little bit easier for us to succeed or making it a little bit easier for us to quote unquote fail.
Yeah. And it reminds me of this idea that first, the idea that, I again heard it somewhere at some point that our eyes is the only part of the brain sticking out, right, into the world. And whatever it's kind of we see with this part of the brain, it seems to be the most important, like to the degree that if we see one person all the time, they all of a sudden become more important just because we see them all the time, right? Without any data, objective data whatsoever, it's just the amount of times we see them. So the same goes, for the foods that we see, or I don't know, maybe books and podcasts that we see again intentionally or not. Whatever we see more often, it becomes like most important, and we are more likely to engage with this thing. Right? Exactly. And I think also because of that, our environment in today's world might be not always beneficial to our, for example, health goals, right? Just because we are made to see things like foods, for example, that are not always best for us. I think also, you mentioned framing as the way to help us go through challenging moments. Like what I mean by that is, for example, sometimes looking at our failures as opportunities to grow, to learn, and improve, and as a necessary way to grow and improve. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that
because of the
word
mythology.
failure, I put it in, quotes before because it's such a loaded word. It's a word that we always try to avoid. We don't want to have that word failure associated with us. We don't like to think about failures or the possibility even in advance that we could fail. But that's because of the word itself. The idea, like the actual experience of failures can be really helpful, honestly, and they might be required for us to actually make real progress. So failure, it comes up in a couple different ways. First of all, we can be better prepared to make it through our goals and through the challenges that pursuing goals can have if we, in advance of experiencing them, anticipate what they could be and plan the backups before we encounter them. So yeah, we want to know, where are we going? What are we working towards? What's our 5-year plan or our 1-month plan, whatever time frame works for you? We need to couple that with thinking concretely about how can I make progress today, this week, and this month. Schedule that time for ourselves, make appointments with ourselves in our calendar to do those concrete things. But in those planning stages, we also need to think about, okay, how could this go wrong? Where is there going to be a challenge? And when that happens, if that happens, what can I do about it? So that if it comes up, we've already done the hard work of trying to think of a solution to move through it. Because if we haven't done that, we're probably short on time, short on resources, maybe not enough money to try to figure out the solution when we're in the middle of a crisis. When we do that, when we start thinking about the obstacles that we might experience, in a sense, we're foreshadowing failure. We're foreshadowing those failures. And when we do that for ourselves, or we do that with our families, or we do that with coworkers, we're normalizing the experience, or normalizing the idea that problems are going to arise. Because if we don't make it okay to experience problems, to have obstacles, to falter along the way, then other people don't want to share them either, because they don't want to be seen as the first person to mess up or the one who let the team down. If, someone's going to get fired this month at our office, well, we don't want to be the one that's admitted to making more mistakes than anybody else. So they sweep them under the rug. And that's problematic, because if there really are problems, then we need to be able to address them. And we can learn from them also, right? We remove the possibility for learning when we don't talk about that.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention, when I personally fail without putting kind of upfront work, trying to predict that failure and the means to deal with that. What happens is when something unexpected happens, I get into this, stress state because it is unexpected. I don't know how to deal with that. And I'm probably, you're right, short on time and resources. And I get into this mindset that is definitely not the best to deal with the problem. Whereas when I anticipate that and I have a plan for that already, I don't get into that state. I'm like, okay, yeah, I have a plan B. I can just continue with this plan now. So that's how, that helps me definitely.
Exactly. Yep. Right idea.
I think what I also wanted to talk about is how to maybe help ourselves to frame learning experiences better. Do you have any examples of, okay, let's say we are doing something, maybe playing drums, and we're not that great, it seems like one failure after another. What did you do to frame that into something different to help to motivate yourself to continue with that also goal that might not be as clear, like when are you going to get better? Nothing is guaranteed.
Right. Well, I didn't become amazing at playing the drums. I just could get through it and do okay. I mean, with a background in music myself, I have a music degree. I'm pretty critical. There are plenty of people who can and should be critical of me playing drums. I am one of them. So, I wasn't fabulous. I just was able to do it enough. And I had to remind myself of that. Eventually, you can do this. No one requires that this be perfect. And what's the worst case scenario? Okay, it doesn't work out. You stink. No one likes it, but you did it and you have a story to tell about it, right? So even, same with whether you played drums poorly for a concert you set up for yourself, or you had a bad vacation, you spent a lot of time and money planning this thing and it rained and your kids were fighting, whatever. the science says actually people still look back fondly on those times, especially if they have the mindset of, I'm going to try to have this not just be a waste, right? If you don't want that experience to have been a waste, that investment in trying to learn how to play drums, or money and vacation days when you're going on a holiday, and you want to make sure that that wasn't a waste, then with time, we're able to do that. Find the funniness in a bad situation, turn it into an interesting story that we can eventually laugh about one day. And that, when I ended up playing this show again, like several thousand strangers were outside, out at this venue, and I was on stage, and I had like no notice that this was going to happen. Like, today, you're playing it today, tonight, in fact. I was so nervous and just thought, oh God, this is awful. This is like, I literally had nightmares about this. Like, this is the moment when I'm going to get called on it. And then people are going to be so critical. First of all, they're not. That's called the illusion of transparency, that people will be able to pick up on all of the emotions that I'm feeling outside, and they're going to know it. And that's going to taint their experience. No, we are pretty good at hiding what our actual inner states are, especially if we want to. And second of all, it's a spotlight effect, which is we think everyone is going to be so focused on us, when really they're not. They're not that as focused on us. They're not going to remember us or that bad experience the way that we are. And that can help reduce some of the anxiety. So I don't know if that's offered some perspective to help.
Thank you for sharing. And I think what it brought me back to is this notion and thought of just changing our perspective, and we are 100% in control of that. And ultimately what matters is what kind of life experience we create for ourselves internally, right? You can make yourself miserable or happy with the same exact thing just by changing the conversation in your head and how you look at things. So that reminded me of, we don't always succeed, but whatever we call it, we can always frame it positively as learning experience, as, fun story to tell, as an adventure. So many different ways to do so. We just, I think, need to remember that we have this capacity. And one way of looking at things is not the only way.
Exactly.
So Emily, we are, almost an hour, and I'm going to be respectful of your time. I know you have a lot of things to take care of in this world. One thing, is there a question that you wish I would ask you and you'd like, to tell listeners a little bit more about, or we kind of covered all the major points?
No, I think you did a great job. Yeah, you covered it all. Those are the 4 main ideas.
Thank you. I tried, but I thought, I'd ask you if you have anything else important to add to that I missed. And the last question, where people can find your work. Obviously, the book is going to be linked in the show notes, but also what are the websites, social media where people can connect with you, your work, and learn more from you? What are the best places?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, where I try to, post links to content like this that I've participated in, and on Psychology Today. I write for Psychology Today as well, so you can look on their website and find out more about behavioral science there. Okay.
Yeah, great places to connect with Emily. I'm going to link it all in the show notes. And again, Emily, thank you so much for your time and your participation. I know that people will benefit a lot from it.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you.